r/AskReddit. People who have survived an attempted murder, what is your story? I was 3 years old and went to this lady's house for swimming lessons. What my parents didn't know was that the lady hated boys. One day she threw me in the pool and left me to die. I sank to the bottom. I was under for several minutes. Somehow a teenager saw this, jumped the fence and rescued me. The ambulance came and I was in ICU for a week. My parents never found out who the teenager was. The lady wasn't arrested. The cops told my parents that it would cost them money to take her to court. This still baffles me. A lawyer read an article in the newspaper and decided to go after the lady, pro bono. She had several businesses involving kids. He was able to shut her down. She ended up as a waitress and eventually got cancer and died. As a lovely parting gift, growing up I sometimes felt like I was drowning when taking a shower or in water. I've overcame this and eventually got a scuba license and still enjoy swimming. My sister's adopted brother, it's complicated, had his throat slit by a hitchhiker and was kicked out of the car and left for dead on a country road. Luckily no arteries were hit. He tied his t-shirt around his throat and managed to walk/crawl to a farmhouse to get help and survived. They caught the guy and he went to jail. New scar and a husky voice was the outcome. A little bit of background, here we use Telegram to buy drugs. We have this big group with lots of dealers, very sorted, very handy. So I just got home from college and parked my car on the street. It was about 2300 hours and I was just sitting and browsing my phone. At some point I got into Telegram to read some work-related messages when suddenly a guy opens the passenger door and tries to get in. I'm trying to push him out and he's like SHH. You better not, and points to the driver's window where another guy was standing pointing a gun at me. He gets into the car and from the back another guy comes in, so now there's 3 of them, one on the passenger seat, one by the driver's window which by now opened the door and putting the gun to my head, and another who was sitting in the back and was pointing a knife to my neck. At first I got really confused and I was like, what the fuck guys? The guy next to me started talking about money I owe them and started searching my car. I told them they're mistaken and he was like, I saw you browsing Telegram, so don't shit me. At that point from some reason I got really calm, as I do not do drugs and I don't owe nobody money. I tried to explain that I was just reading work messages, but the guy with the gun got really mad and hit me with the gun. He tried to pull me out and the dude next to me stopped him and said there's an easy way to check, so he took my phone and started going through everything. At some point he got into my messages with my mom, my little sister. He was checking where do I work. He got into the gallery and found pictures of my dog, and that's when I worried the most. He said to his friends, look how cute his dog is, ain't it? You love your dog, do you? And I didn't reply. Few minutes later and he finds nothing. Then he explains me that they supplied some guy $4K worth of weed and he never paid. Next he says sorry and they're off. TLDR, I was sitting in my car when 3 armed men jumped in thinking I owe them drug money. I wasn't. I had just bought a full sheet of acid, this was 20 years ago, sorry FBI, and I went over to where my friend was living with a bunch of roommates to share the wealth. I knew most of the people he lived with, but there was one guy staying there who I hadn't met before. I basically handed out however many doses people were tough enough to take at once, including 3 or 4 hits to the new guy. We came to find out pretty quickly that new guy had never taken LSD before. Okay, no problem, he's at home, he's surrounded by people he knows, except me, he can just chill and have a good time. We wanted to watch a movie, so we landed on the Brady Bunch movie, which is trippy AF, BTW. Everything's going good, we all start peeking and we're laughing and having a good time, and then, on the movie, the little girl Cindy is getting advice from her dad and says, but I don't want to be a snitch. New guy stands up and roars, is that what you think? You think I'm a farkin' snitch? We all try to calm him down, explain to him that it's a line from the movie, we even rewind the movie so he can watch that part again, but nothing is working. He's tripping too hard to reason with, and he's convinced that we're accusing him of being a snitch. Then he starts pacing back and forth, muttering, this is the kind of shit that makes motherfuckers kill. This is the kind of shit that makes motherfuckers kill. Over and over. Great. He zeroed in on me, I'm sure because he didn't know me, and he's still pacing back and forth and muttering, but now he's giving me a death glare while he does it. I'm getting pretty uncomfortable, obviously, and I'm also peaking from like 10 hits of acid, so my ability to cope with the situation is pretty low. I stand up because, well, there's a guy I don't know pacing around behind me muttering about killing people, and I don't want my back to this dude. This would be a really intense situation even if I wasn't tripping balls, but the acid certainly doesn't help. Suddenly he pulls out a huge hunting knife, lunges at me, and tries to stab me. I dodged him, then he made another try, but by the time his friends had jumped up and were holding him back, he's struggling to break free and screaming, "You think I'm a farkin' snitch? I'll farkin' kill you," and I took the opportunity to bop right on out the door. I was about half a mile from my house, but it took me about 2 hours to find it because I was tripping so hard and I kept getting lost in my own neighborhood. Addendum, he was, in fact, a snitch, and the whole house got raided a few weeks later. A bunch of the guys who lived there got arrested for drugs, although my friend had moved out by that point, so luckily he wasn't one of them. TLDR, guy taking acid for the first time tried to stab me with a hunting knife because he thought Cindy from the Brady Bunch was accusing him of being a snitch. It turned out he was, in fact, a snitch. We were arguing and he started to grab me by the arms and throw me against the wall and to the ground. After maybe the 7th or 8th time of him throwing me, he carried me by my arms to my room and threw me onto the bed. Then, he pinned me down and started choking me. I had tried to get away before it happened, but he grabbed my face and shoved me down. I started to see flashes of black and white. I don't remember how, but I managed to get my feet under him and onto his chest and was able to push him off me. He was my boyfriend at the time. I couldn't believe someone who claimed to love me could do something like that. Now every time I feel even the slightest bit of not being able to breathe, I picture his face. And to make matters worse, he stalked me for like 8 months after I broke up with him. He also told me if he would have gone through it, he would have burned my house down me in it. Hopefully this counts. I live in an extremely rural area. My dad was super abusive. He did a lot of fucked up stuff like stomped my mom's head into a sidewalk when she was 5 months pregnant. Fast forward to when I was 8 years old, he decided to bring the girl he was cheating on my mom with, to their house, to beat my mom. My mother fled to our only neighbor's house to call the police because he cut the phone lines. He left to take his side chick home, so my mother went to get our important documents. He came back starting beating on mom again and said he was going to kill us for calling the cops, and they show up while he was getting his rifle. They arrested him for domestic violence and he got a slap on the wrist because my uncle, his brother, worked with police force as a dispatcher and made it all go away. My mom was completely broken down mentally from brainwashing for years and under heavy influence from his family that it was her fault and they should work it out. They ended up sweeping that under the rug, and the fact that he raped me from 2 years to 7 years. Then after all the trauma mom went through, she went psycho and became an abuser for a long period of time until she tried to stab me to death for not washing dishes one night my senior year. I got away and put myself into debt to go to college to escape that. Years later she started to recover from what he did and I forgave her. I guess the silver lining was that I learned even the sweetest, kindest people can crack under the right circumstances. We may have survived that, but he absolutely destroyed our mental and physical health. Sometimes I wonder if it would have been better to die than to live with the aftermath. It's been hard. I posted this story already a long while back. But basically, I worked in a jail and a guy from a 1%er biker gang tried to pay $10,000 to have me killed because he somehow got the idea that I was the Fed who busted him and was merely pretending to be a jailer so I could spy on him. Don't do meth, kids. The guy was bragging about it and one of the other inmates who I had saved from a heart attack with first aid didn't like that, so he beat the living shit out of the guy and then told me about it. Phone call recordings confirmed that he had promised the money to 2 guys if they shot me in the back of the head while escorting him to court and busted him out. Federal marshals rolled them up and on his way to court I whispered to him, "Your friends won't be joining us." When we got to the planned ambush point, instead of a bond hearing he got charged for trying to have me murdered and organizing an escape. Don't know if this counts as murder, but I was on my way to grab breakfast with my sister. As we left the house there were helicopters flying around outside and we didn't think much of it. We started down the road and noticed that there were no cars or people anywhere. As we were driving, a car was swerving behind us and going super fast. He pulled up next to us and got out with a gun and pointed it right at my sister's face. She slammed on the accelerator and we turned down a few streets until we were sure he wasn't following us. We headed straight home and turned on the news. Turns out he had shot 8 and killed 2 other people in the neighborhood and was later shot by police a few hours later. Edit, death toll. My mom attempted to murder me and my sister when we were younger. She was going through a psychotic episode and pretty suicidal, and I said the wrong thing that set her off. She chased us down to the basement with a knife. We ran into my room and my sister hid in the closet while I tried to fight my mom off at the door. She was trying to push it open while I was trying to push it closed. It was a back and forth struggle until she put her hand in the door, I think she was trying to engage my nonviolence because she thought I wouldn't shut the door on her hand, but I slammed the door over and over again until her fingers broke. Meanwhile, my dad, who was in the house, finally came downstairs to check in what was happening. Mind you, this all happened very fast, and my dad has a habit of zoning out when my mom gets in her episodes. He ended up pulling her off of the door, and my sister and I ran out of the house and jumped in our van. He drove around the corner and turned off the lights, and we all ducked down in our seats to hide and stayed there until my dad saw her drive our other car.
I'd love it if you liked and subscribed.